Good afternoon. This is Dr. Craig Stern from Pharma Pharmaceutical Consultants and ProData Analytics. We're delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you. As I've just been informed, this is our 10th presentation, so we're delighted to be able to continue this. Hopefully people have found the subjects interesting, and we'll continue to do so as long as we have participants who enjoy it and enjoy getting some of this information. As always, we try and remain as unbiased as possible in order to give all views from different stakeholders so that you have the opportunity to understand issues from all different perspectives. I want to talk about a couple of perspectives today. One of them has to deal with some news media that talked about that people are paying more than the cost of drugs. That's a real issue. We need to talk about it. And the second is that biosimilars, or what some people are looking at as being generic drugs to the really expensive specialty drugs, are now coming out. So we need to just talk about them for a moment as well. I do want to identify the fact that we had to delay this. My apologies in that at various times we're going to have to delay these talks because of clinical issues or client issues, and so my apologies for that, but it will be on tape, so you'll have the opportunity to go back and to address it. Let's start with copays, with what people are paying for a moment. What people pay for drugs is not a new issue. For years, there's been issues about people that are comparison pricing in cost of drugs between different pharmacies. There's been a host of different issues lately, obviously, with regard to manufacturers that increase the price of drugs and whether individuals had to pay more for those drugs based on copays, coinsurance, so the drugs weren't covered by their insurance. But there are a few fundamental issues that we should know about. I am not talking, and this is a disclaimer, I'm not talking about trying to defend the practice. I don't mean that at all. I want to understand it because the more we understand these things, then the more that we could identify how to change them or what kind of issues we should address. So on one level, there's been a long-standing historical issue about how much people pay for drugs through pharmacies and how much manufacturers have increased the price of drugs, and that has rolled down to where people are paying more of the cost of drugs. Historically, it's always been that the member paid a fraction of the cost of drug because a health plan paid at least 80% and frequently more than that. So as a result of that, the argument from the health plan side was that individuals don't really know the cost of drugs because they're not paying for it. However, as more and more expensive drugs have come on board, more and more of these drugs, the costs are being shifted, and there's more of what is known as cost sharing, to where the member is paying a larger share of the cost of that drug, and sometimes potentially all of it. Our issue is that there are also several other things that are going on, and I just want to make note of them so that people understand it. On one side, the health plan argues that they have a copay, a coinsurance program. The coinsurance program may be an 80-20, where the plan pays 80%, the member pays 20%. That sounds okay as long as the drug is not that expensive. When it gets really expensive, then 20% turns out to be a lot of money. Or the cost of the drug is an issue and the drug is not covered. So as a result of that, the member is paying for all of the cost of drug or some part of it. There are also programs that we should be aware of, and once again, we're not defending it, we want to understand it. And it's a very long-standing issue where pharmacy benefit managers and health plans went to pharmacy and said, we're going to make a bigger discount on the drugs that we pay. So we pay based on a basis of cost, frequently average wholesale price, and we're going to make a discount which perhaps at one time was 14 or 15%, and then it went to 17%, and then later back to a different number. Well, the idea was that the PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers and health plans, wanted to identify an opportunity where they could give something back to the pharmacy. And the back to the pharmacy was negotiated between the pharmacies, frequently the chains, who were getting a bigger impact in dispensing of drugs, and the pharmacy benefit managers and health plans, by saying, fine, we want to collect the entire copay. So if the plan says that there's going to be X number of dollars for generic and Y number of dollars for brand, we want to collect the entire copay. Whether the cost of the drug is less than that or more than that, we still want the copay. That's part of our offset. And that was included in negotiations for a very long time. Those kind of copay arrangements still exist. There are many that still exist that still have it. Some health plans would argue that no, they've gone more towards cost or cost plus, where they're adding on some particular administrative or dispensing fee. But at the end of the day, these kind of arrangements still exist. So it's very possible that someone could be paying more than the cost of the drug. In general, where this happened was in generics, where a drug could cost literally pennies, but the copay could be $5, $10, or whatever, and the member was paying the full copay, even though the cost of the drug was pennies. As we move more and more to cost plus, we need to realize that these arguments are real, and that people are getting more and more aware of it, because as I've indicated in prior conversations, transparency is really the name of the day. So if a manufacturer is increasing the price, that's a concern. There's also major concerns about, are PBMs increasing the price, and what do they keep? Are health plans increasing the price? What do they keep? Are physicians who are administering drugs, what are they keeping, and what's their premium that is being paid? So there are a lot of moving parts here that are all asking that same question. From our vantage point, we need to understand where each of the stakeholders is involved, because frequently this is not a one stakeholder issue. It's not all about just pharmaceutical manufacturers. It's not all about PBMs. It's not all about health plans. It's not all about providers or physicians or pharmacies, etc. There's a lot of different moving parts here, and we need to be aware of it. Most importantly, we need to be aware that the issue of the cost of the drug is not just one entity. If you read the media, then everybody's pointing fingers, and it's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault, it's the manufacturer's fault. The manufacturers point to PBMs and health plans. Everybody's pointing the fingers, but at the end of the day, there are multiple entities, and we need to understand them in order to do it. If you have questions about it, please feel free to send me questions. I'll be happy to try and answer them in future conversations. I'd also like to make a couple of quick comments about biosimilars. I'm sure many people have heard the name biosimilar. We're talking about the latest addition to specialty medication. Specialty medication, frequently injectable medication. If it's self-injectable, it's taken at home. If it's injected by a physician, a nurse, or other, it is also a part of the specialty drugs. And these are very expensive drugs. They may cost $200,000 or more a year just based on what they're being used for. They originally were supposed to be for orphan diseases and would be given for a very small number of patients. Now they're moving into the center island, and they're being used for chronic therapy for people who have chronic diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or MS or some of the other cancer and some of the other therapies. The main thing here is that while people look at that as being the new generic, from a pharmacology standpoint, from a biochemistry standpoint, they are not the generic of the drug, but they do have the same therapeutic benefit. They still have the same issues that are being used with the Pioneer product. We have written about this, and if anybody's interested, please contact us, and we'll be happy to provide you with one or more of our papers that we've written about it, where we're looking at this entire issue across, frankly, the world, and what's happening in Europe, what's happening in other parts of the world. What's important is people are looking at this And when I say people, it's health plans, it's PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, providers, physicians, etc., are looking at this as a big cost savings to what's going on. And while it may be, and certainly with some of the cost of the drugs, there's certainly a great emphasis and interest in doing so, there's also the major concern that the cost of drugs for the biosimilars may only be a discount of 10, 15%, maybe slightly more, but nothing like generics for standard pharmaceuticals where the cost difference is 50%, 70% or more in order to try and discount it. So on one level, the major issue and the major interest is in cost saving, but that may not be realized to any great extent. The other piece to know about this is that this will require people to become more aware of what goes on. We've talked about transparency. We've talked about the fact that people want to know the cost plus basis rather than paying some number, whether it's been inflated by the premium, whether it's been inflated by copays, whether it's been inflated by the manufacturers, whether it's been inflated by PBMs or whoever. But at the end of the day, people want to know what the actual cost is and then work to decide what their actual cost will be. That's what they're going after. We discuss it at length in some of these papers, and we really ask you to consider asking us. They're on our webpage, but clearly we'll be happy to direct you to the right papers so that you can address it. I thank you for taking a few minutes of your time to talk to me. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you. We do this usually on Wednesdays at about 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, and based on clients, based on other things that we're doing, we may have to delay in some cases. But I also ask you to point to www.profarmaconsultants.com/rxinfox.html. That's where we're keeping track of all the news every day from a host of issues from pharmacy, pharmaceutical manufacturers, evidence-based medicine, etc., so that you've got some idea of what's going on in the industry. We look forward to talking to you again next week. Thanks for your time. Have a wonderful day.